in addition to the energy, the cost of energy, the next most important cost component in running a wastewater treatment plant is sludge handling. So it is very important how much sludge is being produced because it directly influences the operational cost. In Organica plants, there is lower sludge production. And in the next few minutes, we take a look at it. How is it possible? Why is it that less sludge is produced in these treatment plants? We have established a few minutes ago that in an Organica plant, you have a larger biodiversity and you have larger biomass. It is really the larger biodiversity that becomes very important from the sludge production point of view. We take the reactors that we looked at and we arrange them in a series, as you can see it on this slide. As the water goes from the left to the right, the composition of the waters changes. In the beginning, there's a lot of ammonia in the water and a lot of food. So you will see organisms in the first reactor that are adapted to those kind of conditions. But as the water goes from one reactor to the other, and different organisms will adapt to the various conditions, as the water makes its way from left to the right in these reactors, and notice that there are at least 6 reactors in a series here. Different ecologies, different communities will develop in each tank. So let's take the example. In the beginning, there's a lot of ammonia from urine, and then there's a lot of food from the other stuff. Okay? That means you will find organisms that are adapted to those conditions. And as the water goes from one tank to the other, and then it reaches to the end, on the other end of the train, there is very little food left. And of course, there's no ammonia left if you do a good job. But when you have very little food left, you need organisms that are adapted to those conditions so they can screen out the tiny little percentages that are left in the last reactor. What we find, once you have a larger number of organisms, and we do, what is called the food chain effect will come to life. Because we have not only bacteria, but higher level of organisms, such as worms and mussels and fish even at the end, the higher level of organisms will always feed on the lower one. You can look at it as a system where the food source, which is the wastewater, and the contaminants in the water are actually fueling a larger ecosystem. And of course, for a larger ecosystem, a more complex ecosystem, you need more food. At the end of the day, as these creatures are feeding on each other, you will have less material left, which translates to lower sludge production. So let's take a look at some of the characters that are playing in this game. These organisms that you see on the screen now are tiny little organisms that are swimming around. They're in suspension in the water. They take the dissolved organic matter and they build into their bodies. These are the little guys. What you see on the next one is the big guy who is attached to the root on the left-hand side. And is waiting until the little guy shows up. And the little guy makes its way into its mouth. And then with a big gulp, the little guy becomes dissolved organic matter in the belly of the big guy. This is predation. And then another one will come which is called a grazer, and will eat this big guy, but this is an even bigger guy. And so the food chain builds up and the organisms feed on each other. The next one is an amoeba. It's a one-cell organisms, and you can see how on the top of the screen it will gobble up the dirt there. We call it the vacuum cleaner. Or the next one is an aquatic worm, and you can see how it's looking for food and how the food makes its way down its digestive tract. You see, this is really like National Geographic under the microscope. But these guys are doing vital work for us. They clean the wastewater for us. The next one is these organisms, again, are attached to the root. And these can be found towards the end of the treatment train. These have large mouths, and cilia around the edge, and they filter a lot of water through their bodies. So the last little bits of colloids and components can be taken out of the water. Very efficient filtering mechanism here. All in all, in addition to the energy savings, it is the lower sludge production that is an important component that contributes to the fact these treatment plants are run by significantly lower operating costs. And remember, underneath this beautiful botanical garden, there is a reactor teeming with life, with thousands of species doing the job for us.